welcome back to my channel. It's been a minute. I know, I'm aware, life has been lifing, and I know I always say that in every video, but honestly, adulting is sometimes truly the pits because there's just so much going on. I know at the beginning of the year I did say I'll be consistent with my videos. First video was January. We are now in April. We'll try to do better for the rest of the year. But anyways, welcome back. If you are new here, my name is Grace Nondekombe and I make videos around faith, wellness, and lifestyle. Today's video is more of life-based, faith-based video, and I'm going to be talking about seasons of waiting, which everyone has been through some kind of season of waiting or is currently in some kind of season of waiting. So this is a video that everyone can probably relate to. So I'm going to give a few nuggets on that, a few of my life experiences through some seasons of waiting, and just kind of a few examples from the Bible. So yes, please stay with me. And if you do have any comments of kind of your season of waiting, something you went through, or an encouragement you can give to someone that's on this video, that's tuned into this video, please do put it on the comments below. But as we go ahead, please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with your network, your family, your friends. It may encourage someone. Right. So basically, seasons of waiting, as I said, is something that we've all kind of been through or are in the midst of at the moment. And it looks different for everyone, and even like the periods of waiting for certain things are different periods of time for different people. It could be waiting for, maybe you're a fresh graduate or you've been graduated and you've been waiting for employment for a year, so it could be waiting for employment. It could be you've been waiting for a solid relationship and you haven't yet found one. It could be waiting for marriage. It could be waiting for a child. It could be waiting for breakthrough in your business or in your employment or promotion. Different kinds of waiting. Sorry, there's wasps all around me. I'm just praying I'm able to get through this video without panicking. Right, anyway, so different kinds of seasons of waiting, and yeah, they all look different for everyone. So first thing I'm going to say is, when you are in a season of waiting, don't compare your season to someone else's season. So it could be that you are praying for a job, and maybe your friend who you were in school with, you might have been gotten higher grades than them. You might have graduated cum laude, and they may have been like an okay, maybe average student, and they get a really good job right out of university, and you've been at home for a year still waiting for a job. Don't think it's unfair, or don't get impatient or start to question God and say why. Seasons of waiting look different for everyone. It could be that maybe you were always the upright child and you always did things by the book or did things rightly, you were brought up well, and then maybe you end up waiting for a relationship, and maybe you're 35 and still haven't found the right guy, and maybe you had this wayward sister, right, who got married right out of university and is in a happy marriage, and you're questioning God as to why. Or it could even be that you have been asking God for a child, and you might have known someone who may have had multiple abortions and was able to be very fertile and have children one after the other, and you've kept yourself, and you could still even be a virgin, and now you're married and you haven't been blessed with a child yet. So you can see how sometimes seasons of waiting can have us questioning why, or why me, or how come this is happening to me, and get us to a point of saying life is being really unfair to me. But firstly, I want to say we shouldn't look at other people's situations and only focus on our own in our seasons of waiting, and continue to trust and be hopeful and faithful in prayer, right? So for me, I think I want to give an example of when I was in university. I always wanted to get married early. For me, when I was done with university, yeah, of course I wanted a job, but I think my P1 was to find a life partner. I always wanted to get married early. I always wanted to find a family early. So during uni, like in the latter years of my university and into my post-grad, I started kind of intentionally looking for someone that could be like a suitable life partner. And in that, I did that praying and looking for a suitable life partner. And when I started serving church and I was ushering, and then also at the tea and coffee table at my church back in Cape Town, shout out Every Nation Baxter. It got to a point where, and I think most like church girlies can relate to this, sometimes when you're waiting for a husband, it gets to a point where every kind of eligible Christian bachelor that comes along, you have yourself questioning, is he the one? Is he the one? And that gets very unhealthy. So I found myself getting to that mindset of whenever a church guy comes along and he's single, and I'm like, is he the one? Is he the one? And eventually that gets very unhealthy. So firstly, I had to get myself out of that mindset because that was getting very unhealthy, and for me mentally it wasn't doing me well. So that was the first thing. So don't try and question everything that seems like what you may be looking for that comes your way, and start to think, is this the opportunity? Is this it? Is this the one? Is this that? That can get to you, and you can end up getting into your head and getting very frustrated with time. So first things first is, when you're waiting for something, don't think everything that comes your way is it, or don't get too much into everything that comes your way thinking that's it. That can get you very frustrated. And then next thing, if you do find yourself in that situation, don't end up throwing in the towel. That's why it's important not to keep thinking, is this the opportunity? Is this the person? Is this a sign from God? And eventually, if you do that too many times often, you will end up throwing in the towel. So second thing is, don't get into your head and thinking everything, is this the one, is this it? Second thing is, don't throw in the towel when you're in season of waiting. It's very important that when we're seasons of waiting, we surround ourselves with godly community that can encourage us. We stay persistent and hopeful and even joyful in prayer. And also we continue to read scripture about different people that had kind of seasons of waiting and how they endured and how things turned out not so great when they didn't endure the seasons of waiting. We have the example of the woman in the Bible, Sarah, who continually prayed for a child, for God to give her a child. And it was in old age, and God had promised a child, but God wasn't coming through, probably in the timeline that she expected it. And then eventually she asked her husband to sleep with one of their maids. And the maid conceived and had a child. And when the maid conceived, she also got pregnant and eventually had a child. But then you can see how these two nations that came out of the two children have been at war till date because of not waiting on God, right? That's an example of someone who got impatient in their waiting, and you can see the ripple effect and the consequences generations and generations and hundreds and thousands of years later. And also, even what comes to mind is the wife of Lot, who she was promised something by God and God kind of saved them, but one thing God said is, don't look back. And they started going along their journey, and she looked back at her life and the city that was kind of crumbling down that they had left behind, and eventually, right away, in the moment, she became a pile of salt. I know, like in the Bible, things were pretty drastic back then, and when God decided to do something, he did it in the moment. It could be you're struck by thunder, or you become a pile of salt, or you're swallowed by something. It was like quite hectic back then. We're lucky we don't have that anymore. Thank you, Lord, for the cross, and thank you for the Son, Jesus Christ, that was sent. So grateful. But I think it is important to know that in seasons of waiting, if we're not faithful, there is consequences, if we look at different stories in the Bible. So it's very important that even if we don't see something that looks promising, we still depend on God, knowing that God is faithful and just, and he will see through what he has promised to beautiful completion. For example, if I look back at the wife of Lot, so she was going forward and she was moving, and that's sometimes what we do in the season of waiting. We may be faithful and doing what was supposed to in that season, but then we look back at our past life. And that can look like, for example, we're praying for a relationship or marriage, and we're single, and we're being, faithful, and we're serving, and maybe an ex comes along, and we're like, it won't hurt to go on a date, or it won't hurt to give this ex a chance. And God has clearly told you this is not your life partner, this is not the person for you, and you look back like the wife of Lot. And that can either keep you in waiting for a few more years, or that could completely, ruin your chances of finding someone when you wanted to find someone, when God had prepared for you to find someone. So maybe God had someone waiting for you at the end of that month, and you decided to look back at an ex, and eventually you end up prolonging your season of waiting to a year or 2 years longer or 5 years longer, because you looked back at what God told you to leave and didn't continue to look forward at what the promise was lying ahead of you. So it's very important in seasons of waiting that we don't look back at our past and be like, okay, nothing is coming through at the moment, so maybe let me just go where it seemed comfortable and wait there a little while. I'll continue to pray, but I'm uncomfortable in the season of waiting, so let me get back to what was comfortable, what was familiar, and what I knew. And that's where we make a mistake. When in a season of waiting, God is trying to test our patience, right? And what we need to know is that in more seasons of waiting, God is trying to build our fruit of the Spirit and different parts of the fruit of the Spirit. So it could be that God is trying to build our endurance, God is trying to build our patience, and it's a test. That's why it's called a season. Normally seasons that God gives us are tests, and he's trying to see if we come out victorious at the end of that. So it's very important that we hang on to Christ, that we continue to pray, that we surround ourselves with community that's encouraging, and that we don't look back at our past. So God is trying to build that muscle of patience and endurance and long suffering. So in seasons of waiting, please, please, please do not look back at the past of what seemed comfortable and convenient, and maybe it wasn't too bad. Let me hang out there for a little while till God finally answers, because God is not working according to my timeline. Nah, please don't look back. And then another thing to remember in seasons of waiting is that normally as human beings, we have our own timeline set out, but God's timeline is always very different. I mean, when I started this year, there's certain things I was expectant of and hoping God would come through for me. And in my mind, I was like, by January, this will be done. By February, this will be done. By March, this will be done. We are in April, and those things I was waiting on, and I had planned my months according to that, I still haven't seen those things come to pass. And there have been times where I've been like, Lord, what now? Because these 3 months have already gone by. My year was supposed to work out like this. I was praying all the latter months of 2024. I was praying for this, and you were supposed to answer me by January, because I've put so many things on hold waiting for this particular thing. And now in April, it will be May soon. By next week will be May. So what am I supposed to do now? So honestly, even as I make this video, I am in a kind of like an uncomfortable period of just feeling like, what next? Or do I continue to wait? What am I supposed to do in the season? But I am trying my best to like forge forward and to keep my eyes focused on what Christ has promised, because I know it is coming, but I just don't know what the timeline looks like. So I'm just hoping and praying that God's timeline is always best, which it always is. There have been seasons of waiting for me in the past where I've looked back, when God has finally answered, I look back and I'm like, that's why you didn't answer that prayer request in my timeline, because if you had answered it then, I would have screwed it up. Or if God had answered it in my timeline, I wasn't prepared enough. I wasn't mature enough for that opportunity or for that relationship. So it's important to know that God knows and God sees the bigger picture, and God has our best interests at heart. And that's what keeps me going. Honestly, I used to be very impatient. I have become much more patient as I've grown older, and as I can look back at God answering certain prayers, and I'm able to see, okay, God knows me much more than I know myself. And if God had given me that opportunity back then, I would have fumbled it. So God knows when He's going to give it to me, when it will be best. And in His time, all things work out beautifully. So, excuse me, I'm just waiting on God's timing, knowing that to work out beautifully. And for me, knowing that God has my best interest at heart keeps me hopeful, and it keeps me more at peace, as much as there is still a bit of turmoil from time to time, because at the end of the day, we are human. But I am much more at peace knowing that God will work it out in His time. God will work it out. So what I can say is God's timing won't look like your timing. And an example is, when the Israelites were kind of forging towards the promised land, and they had to wait for so long to get the promised land. I'm sure for them, it seemed like we're going to walk for a few months and we're going to get there. And, I'm probably going to be the same age or age older. My kids are going to grow up in the land of milk and honey, and it's going to be all good, and I'm going to have my grandkids there, etc, etc. But the people that actually started out the journey, and the leaders that started out the journey, actually didn't even get to the promised land. And that's pretty crazy, because this was a promise that they thought was for their generation. And the next generation is the one that ended up enjoying, the fruits of their sacrifice and their trip. And it's really important to know that sometimes our seasons of waiting are for the next generation. And sometimes what we may do is just part of the journey, but we might not actually get to the promised land, but we'll put things in place so that our children, or our children's children, or the people that we foster are able to enjoy the fruits of our faithfulness. So it's really important that we remember that some seasons of waiting, we may not enjoy that fruit, but if we're faithful, people that come after us will be able to enjoy that fruit. It could be people in your church, it could be people in your family, it could be your children. But what's important is that overall, our lives are being lived for the glory of Christ, and it shouldn't be about us all the time. So even in seasons of waiting, we need to keep in mind that some seasons are not only for our benefit, but are for the benefit of others. And when we start to look at life from that perspective and take a step back and be like, my life is not my own, I'm here for the glory of God, I'm just a vessel through which God is working through, it makes those seasons easier, and it makes our trust in Christ easier. So we need to remember that some seasons of waiting may be for us, some may be for our faithfulness to prove victorious for the next generation. So that's one thing to remember in seasons of waiting as well. Yeah, and also just to remember that seasons of waiting, when they get uncomfortable, is a time for us to really get into prayer, to really get into worship, to get at God's feet, to really get into our word and find encouragement from there. Instead of finding encouragement in things that are unhealthy or habits that are unhealthy, being like, okay, I feel so stressed, it's not coming through right now. Let me indulge in some alcohol or whatever it may be, or let me just go out with friends and forget about this. When you feel the world weighing down on you and you're like, I am tired of waiting, it's a time for you to kind of get into prayer, get into your praise and worship, just sit at God's feet, get into your room, put on some worship music, pray. If you need to cry, cry at God's feet. It's not guaranteed that it'll be easy, but it's a time for you to really press in and get into the word and see what God says about who you are, about your life, and what his promises are to you, right? So yeah, that's what I can say about seasons of waiting. I kind of had to summarize all my points, but that's the kind of encouragement I can give when you're in a season of waiting. Look to Christ. His plan is greater than your plan, and he has good plans for you, and he loves you immensely, and he knows what your life is meant to look like, and he sees the bigger picture. So hold on, don't give up, don't look back at the past or what may seem comfortable, but press on and know that God's plan is greater than our plans. And in that season, know that God is trying to build certain parts of his fruit of the Spirit in you. So it's really important that we stay faithful in our waiting, we persevere, and that we know that other people are looking to us. So one day we may share our testimony of our waiting and people will be encouraged. So let's persevere, let's look to Christ in our seasons of waiting. And also, one thing I forgot to notice, let's not be idle in seasons of waiting. If you're looking for a job, for example, don't just be at home idle. Like, keep applying every day, keep looking for a role, but also find something that can keep you working and useful. If it means serving at your local church, doing some admin work, do that. If it means starting a small at-home business that you can do, you've got some baking products at home, baking and trying to find places that you can deliver baked goods to, do that. But make sure that you don't stay idle in your season of waiting. It's really important that you keep yourself busy, because if you are idle, it's what you're waiting for is going to end up eating you up. So it's really important that you stay busy with constructive things, of course. If you are waiting for employment and you are just waiting at home, you will get frustrated because you're going to pray and the days will feel long. So it's important that you invest in soft and hard skills that are going to help you when you eventually do get employed. If you're waiting for a relationship and maybe you don't work and you're at home, it's important that you do invest in yourself firstly. So activities that make you more attractive, say a sport, working on yourself, on your body. If you've got past trauma, work on that. If there's certain YouTubers that make videos or podcasts that you can listen to on relationships that can make you a better suitable partner, watch stuff like that. So don't stay idle during your season of waiting. It's really important that you keep investing in yourself and working on yourself. So you wake up, pray about what you're waiting for, get about your day and get busy with constructive things. Pray when you remember, get busy. And when you come back, the time will feel shorter. It won't feel as frustrating. It won't feel as long because you have been busy and constructive during your season of waiting. So that's what I can encourage anyone that's in the kind of season of waiting. So yeah, thank you for watching. If you did find this video useful, please do share it with others. If you're not subscribed already, please do subscribe down below, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.